In the moonlit waters of Charleston Harbor, 1862, a slave named Robert Smalls put on his master's tall straw hat, stood at the helm of a Confederate warship, and did the unthinkable. He steered it directly toward the Union blockade. He didn't just steal a ship. He stole his family's freedom, outsmarted an entire army, and forced Abraham Lincoln to change the course of the American Civil War. This is not a myth. This is the man who went from being property to a United States congressman. Chapter 1. The Sound of the Bells. The humidity in Beaufort, South Carolina, was a physical weight, thick enough to swallow the sound of the Atlantic surf. For young Robert Smalls, the world was measured in bells. The morning bell told him when his body belonged to the McKee family. The evening bell told him he had survived another day of being human capital. His mother, Lydia, was a woman of quiet, terrifying strength. She saw the spark in Robert, a dangerous intelligence that the plantation system was designed to crush. To protect him, she did something paradoxical. She made him witness the full horror of slavery. She took him to the auction blocks in Charleston, forcing him to watch families torn apart. "Look at them, Robert," she whispered, her voice a low vibration. "Never let them think they own your mind. The body can be caged, but the mind is a map to somewhere else." Chapter 2. The Master of the Water. By the time the clouds of the Civil War gathered in 1861, Robert had been sent to Charleston to work. He was a natural on the water. He learned the complex currents of the harbor, the hidden sandbars, and the language of the tides. While the white sailors saw a silent laborer, Robert was memorizing the depth of every channel and the timing of every Confederate patrol. He was eventually assigned to the CSS Planter, a luxury cotton steamer converted into a Confederate military transport. As the ship's wheelman, he was the brain of the vessel, though he was never given the title. He wore the uniform of a deckhand, but he held the lives of the Confederate officers in his calloused hands every time they navigated the treacherous Stono Reach. Chapter 3. The Midnight Gamble. The idea was born in a cramped cabin. Robert looked at his wife, Hannah, and their 2 children. He knew that at any moment they could be sold. The South was winning, and the peculiar institution of slavery looked unshakable. "We are going to take the ship," Robert told his small circle of fellow enslaved crewmen. The plan was suicide. They would wait for the white officers to stay ashore for a night of partying in Charleston. Then, they would pick up their families at a hidden dock, navigate past 5 Confederate forts, including the massive guns of Fort Sumter, and head for the Union blockade. "If we are caught," Robert said, looking at the crates of explosives on the deck, "we blow the ship. We do not go back to the chains. We go to the bottom of the sea." Chapter 4. The Straw Hat and the Ghost Ship. On the night of May 13th, 1862, the Planter slipped its moorings. Robert put on the captain's signature straw hat and long coat. He mimicked the captain's posture, leaning against the pilot-house window. As they approached Fort Johnson, Robert pulled the cord. 2 long blasts, 1 short, the secret Confederate signal. The guards looked out at the silhouette of the ship. They saw the familiar hat. They saw the steady hand. "Pass, Planter!" they shouted. The most heart-stopping moment came at Fort Sumter. The dawn was breaking. The shadows were thinning. If the guards saw Robert's face, it was over. Robert didn't flinch. He gave the signal again, his heart drumming against his ribs like a trapped bird. The massive gates of the harbor loomed. Beyond them lay the open sea and the Union Navy, who would likely fire on a Confederate ship before asking questions. Chapter 5. From Prize to Politician. When the Planter reached the Union fleet, Robert hauled down the palmetto flag and raised a white bedsheet. "Good morning, sir," Robert shouted to the stunned Union captain of the USS Onward. "I have brought you some of the Confederates' big guns, and a few men who might be of use to you." The news electrified the North. Robert Smalls became an overnight sensation. He met with President Abraham Lincoln and Secretary of War Edwin Stanton. He didn't just ask for his own freedom, he successfully argued that black men should be allowed to fight for the Union. Because of Robert Smalls, the first African American regiments were formed. Chapter 6. The Shadow of Sumter. The CSS Planter creaked as it sliced through the black water of Charleston Harbor. Robert Smalls stood at the wheel, his knuckles white. To his left, tucked behind a pile of coal bags, were his wife Hannah and their 2 children. They were silent, paralyzed by the knowledge that a single cry from the baby would mean an immediate death sentence. "Steady," Robert whispered, more to himself than to the engine. Ahead lay Fort Sumter, the jagged tooth of the Confederacy. It was here the war had begun, and for Robert, it was the final gate to hell or heaven. The fort was bristling with heavy artillery, the very guns Robert had helped load just days prior. "Who goes there?" a voice boomed from the ramparts, distorted by the wind. Robert didn't hesitate. He pulled the whistle cord with the exact rhythm of the ship's captain, C.J. Reliea. Hoot, hoot, hoot. He leaned out of the pilot house just enough to show the silhouette of the wide-brimmed straw hat. The seconds stretched into eternities. A guard's lantern flickered on the wall of the fort. Robert could see the muzzles of the cannons pointing directly at them. If they opened fire, the planter, loaded with ammunition, would vanish in a fireball visible from miles away. "Pass, planter!" the sentry finally yelled. "Safe journey to the Stono!" As the ship moved into the darkness of the Atlantic, the crew began to weep. But Robert knew the danger had only changed shape. Ahead lay the Union blockade, the vessels of iron that saw any ship coming out of Charleston as a target to be sunk on sight. Chapter 7. The White Flag of Mercy. As the sun began to bleed over the horizon, painting the Atlantic in hues of bruised purple and gold, the lookout spotted the USS Onward. It was a massive Federal gunboat, and its portholes were already opening to reveal the heavy guns. "Lower the palmetto flag," Robert barked. The Confederate flag, the symbol of his bondage, hit the deck. In its place, they hauled up a white bedsheet Hannah had brought from their home. On the USS Onward, Captain J.F. Nichols squinted through his glass. He saw a Confederate steamer charging toward them. He was seconds away from giving the order to fire at will when his navigator shouted, "Sir, look at the colors! It's a white flag!" The planter came alongside the massive Union ship. Robert Smalls stepped to the railing, removed the master's straw hat, and looked up at the Union officers. "I am Robert Smalls," he shouted, his voice carrying the weight of generations. "I have brought you a ship of war, her guns, and her ammunition, and I have brought you myself and my family." The Union sailors, many of whom had never seen a black man in a position of such command, stood in stunned silence. Then a cheer erupted from the Onward that could be heard all the way to the Carolina coast. Chapter 8. The Meeting with the Great Emancipator. The news of the stealing of the planter traveled like wildfire. Within weeks, Robert was no longer a runaway. He was a celebrity. But Robert wasn't interested in fame. He wanted a seat at the table of power. By August 1862, Robert found himself in Washington, D.C., walking the marbled halls of the White House. He was there to meet President Abraham Lincoln. The contrast was staggering. Lincoln, the tall, gaunt, weary president, and Smalls, the stocky, powerful, and defiant former slave. "Mr. President," Robert said, standing tall in a new suit, "my people are ready to fight. We know the swamps, we know the harbors, and we know the enemy. Give us the rifles, and we will win this war for you." At that moment, the Union was hesitant to arm black men. Many feared it would cause a revolt in the border states. But Smalls was the living proof of black competence and courage. It was this meeting, and Robert's sheer presence, that helped convince Lincoln to sign the order allowing the 1st African American regiments, the 1st South Carolina Volunteers, to be raised. Chapter 9. Returning as a Conqueror. The war raged on, and Robert was sent back to the front, not as a laborer, but as a pilot for the Union Navy. In 1863, during a fierce battle in Charleston Harbor, the captain of the planter, now a Union ship, became paralyzed with fear under heavy Confederate fire. The captain ordered the ship to surrender. Robert Smalls refused. He knew what happened to black men captured by the Confederacy. They were not treated as prisoners of war. They were executed or sold back into slavery. "I am taking command!" Robert shouted over the roar of the shells. He shoved the captain aside, grabbed the wheel, and steered the ship through a gauntlet of fire to safety. For his bravery, he was promoted to the rank of captain, becoming the first black man to hold that rank in the U.S. Navy. He was now earning the same $150 a month that his former masters used to earn. Chapter 10. The Ultimate Irony. When the war finally ended in 1865, Robert Smalls returned T.